We start the weekend in the south in double figures, but we also do start with a lot of cloud and further rain. It could cause some further issues because it's been so wet. We'll be seeing snow on the hills across Scotland as that rain pushes northwards. Should clear from Northern Ireland, at least for a time, before the showers get going. And the rain will then push away from England and Wales during Saturday afternoon. So it will turn drier through the day. It'll probably also then turn colder. We could get up to double figures in the morning, but come the afternoon, temperatures certainly in the west will be dropping away once more because colder air is following on behind. And that's going to be a feature into next week. Through Sunday, and particularly Monday and Tuesday, colder air returns, which means the return of frost and ice. Bye for now.
I'm Camilla Tominey. Join me on GB News on Sunday mornings for a politics show with personality on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess I've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
They've been back for a week, but what have our MPs been up to? Today, we explore their
financial interests. We also look at whether or not a deal is going to be done over the Northern Ireland Protocol, perhaps soon, and anti-Semitism on campuses in the United Kingdom. All that to come after the headlines.
Good morning, it's 9:31. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Scotland's First Minister says talks held with the Prime Minister last night were constructive and cordial. Rishi Sunak and Nicola Sturgeon will announce millions of pounds in government funding today to drive growth in Scotland. Downing Street says the money will go towards creating thousands of jobs and opportunities, as well as boosting the country's economy. Ms Sturgeon said there was no indication from Mr Sunak that there'd be any additional funding to stop strike action within the NHS. The economy unexpectedly grew by 0.1% between October and November, despite the soaring cost of living. The Office for National Statistics recorded a slowdown in growth, though, after a 0.5% increase the previous month. It says the economy was helped by people filling the pubs to watch the World Cup. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says the government has a clear plan to halve inflation this year and to get the economy growing again. A man has been charged with the murder of 26-year-old Elle Edwards, who was shot outside a pub in Wirral on Christmas Eve. 22-year-old Connor Chapman from Woodchurch has also been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder and possession of a firearm. He's been remanded in custody and will appear in court later today. Merseyside Police says a 23-year-old woman arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender has been released on bail. And tributes continue to pour in for Elvis Presley's only child, Lisa Marie Presley, who's died at the age of 54. A warning: the following contains flashing images. It's understood the singer-songwriter suffered a cardiac arrest at her home in Los Angeles yesterday and was rushed to hospital. Actor John Travolta has said his heart goes out to Miss Presley's family. Her death comes just days after she attended the Golden Globe Awards, where actor Austin Butler took home the Best Actor award for his portrayal of her father. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Tom with the briefing.
Good morning, it's 9:30 and this is the briefing with me, Tom Harwood. 9:33, I should say. Now we're on your TV and your radio. First to something that has got the corridors of power jittering and whispering this week. A snazzy new dashboard that has been compiled bringing together MPs' financial interests. Promoted by some news organisations as the Westminster accounts, this tool boldly tells us that MPs have received a whopping £17.1 million on top of their salaries since 2019. Wow, millions. Is the end of representative democracy nigh? Are our MPs laughing all the way to the bank? Well, let's break this number down. £17.1 million is the amount the dashboard tells us MPs have accrued since December 2019. That's more than 3 years ago. It equates to roughly £5.7 million a year. Now, if we divide that by 650 MPs, that works out as £8,769 each, just about enough to buy a mid-range second-hand car. And yet, it isn't even that, because this number doesn't represent the cash that MPs have trousered. In reality, much hasn't even come close to a single MP's bank account. Not that the reporting around the dashboard has often sought to highlight this. No, a large proportion of Mansfield MP Ben Bradley's cash on this charge sheet, for example, consists of free tickets given as gifts in kind to local football matches. Far from sinister cash donations, this is simply the kind of community engagement that you'd expect from any good local MP. Meanwhile, Maria Caulfield has registered just around £9,000 from a nefarious organisation called the Royal Marsden Hospital. Well, what perverse influence might this opaque establishment be having over our politics? Caulfield, a registered nurse, worked part-time on its wards. And then we come to 4 of the highest-scoring MPs. Let's have a look at them in turn. Keir Starmer has declared just around £800,000. Next, we can see that Rebecca Long-Bailey has declared £400,000. Following that, we can also see that Liz Truss has declared just over £500,000, as has her rival Rishi Sunak, £550,000. Now, the implication here, of course, is that the MPs have pocketed this money in outside earnings. In reality, however, as we can all remember, each of them ran substantial leadership campaigns during this Parliament, far from comparable to outside earnings. Or take Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, for example. He's trousered hundreds of thousands of pounds, so says the dashboard, donated by interest groups and high net worth individuals. But this money wasn't trousered. A little bit of research shows that recent donations are specifically to fund extra staff members in his office. Not that the Westminster Accounts dashboard bothers to report this. Again and again, this indiscriminate dashboard does not sufficiently differentiate between gifts, donations, and earnings. Nor does it begin to explain where this money actually went. Perhaps the biggest takeaway from the dashboard is that just how little our most senior politicians have been able to accrue. Theresa May, for example, has earned just £2.8 million in the last 3 and a bit years. Now, to you and me, that may seem like a huge amount of money. It is. But on the other hand, it's the largest amount earned by any MP. And it comes in at less than £1 million a year. Compare that to those at the top of their game in law or finance. Does the former head of one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council not count for as much? Indeed, far from Theresa May earning less than £1 million a year being a scandal of exuberance, the only scandal that I can see is that a former Prime Minister of one of the wealthiest and most significant countries in the world is earning so comparatively little. What does that say about Britain? That the former leader of this country is valued to the tune of, get this, 4 Texas car wash managers. Again, it's surprising that not a single MP earns more. And why do I say that? Surely being an MP is a full-time job. Well, yes, but in reality that hinges on a number of definitions. The role of being an MP, of course, is to represent constituents. Yet virtually no MP can agree what that actually means, or how much time that's supposed to take up. You only need to look at the Cabinet, or the Shadow Cabinet. Ministers spend more time on their briefs than they do personally on constituent casework. Not to say that their constituencies go uncared for. They have excellent offices, for example, and many do devote lots of time to those matters. They just don't devote as much time as they do to their departmental ones. And so on it goes, whether it's junior ministers, whips, parliamentary undersecretaries of state, personal private secretaries, or the shadow versions of all of the above. The fact of the matter is that MPs do have time to do all of these roles on top of being an MP. Now, you only need to look at how much time former ministers suddenly have on their hands, often to write memoirs or take up causes, many of which are not immediately related to constituency issues. Whether it's Matt Hancock and dyslexia awareness, Liam Fox and provision for those with Down syndrome, or Ian Duncan Smith in combating Chinese authoritarianism. These are voluntary and noble causes that can take up huge amounts of time. Elsewhere, James Davies works part-time as a GP. David Lammy hosts a radio show. Chris Bryant writes books. Clearly, these are examples that enhance the role of an MP, while indicating that being an MP isn't a traditional full-time job in the sense that most people might think of one. MPs' jobs are weird. MPs are weird. And analysing their roles through the lens of normal jobs is always going to lead to bad conclusions. MPs clearly have time to work beyond the core functions of simply pretending to be a local councillor, inspecting potholes, forwarding constituents' concerns to relevant authorities, and occasionally voting or asking a question in the chamber. So rowing back now, in this context, just £8,700 per MP coming from donations, outside earnings and free event tickets seems scandalously low. Far from the implication of some sort of expenses scandal 2.0 of Watergate proportions, ultimately all this dashboard serves to show in reality is how little money there is in UK politics. Certainly compared to the US, where one special election candidate can enjoy over £10 million, spending thrown their way during one campaign to win one seat. The Westminster accounts shows individuals supposedly at the top of their game in politics. It shows they can only attract a measly four-figure sum through speeches, columns, books, legal work, or indeed total donations to their offices or political campaigns. When all is said and done, I find myself coming to the perhaps surprising conclusion that there simply isn't enough money in British politics. Well, here for some reaction now is our GB News political reporter, Catherine Forster. Now, Catherine, do you agree with my analysis there? Because obviously it is to some extent poking fun a little bit. Clearly, a lot of people complain about money in politics, and clearly there are some issues. But ultimately, it is surprising that the average works out at just around £8,000.
It doesn't seem a lot, does it? And of course, the MP's base salary is £84,000. Now, OK, that is a lot of money. It's obviously vastly more than the average person earns. But these people have incredibly important jobs. They make the laws. The actions that they take affect all of us up and down the country. And while I think transparency is obviously a good thing, it's good that you should be able to see what they earn. As you say, the way that it's been bundled together, things like football tickets, yes, you would expect a local MP who likes football to go and support his local team. Yes, it's great, surely, that Maria Caulfield is earning some money as a nurse. Those are positives, surely. I think the worry is that potentially MPs might feel that they're being vilified to some extent. And we know that we have a problem attracting good people into politics. It's not an easy job. You've got to have a pretty tough skin. And we know with all the various scandals that there've been, the turmoil of the last few years, you've got no job security. You've got 5 years, maybe another 5. You've got to battle every time. You've got to have a lot of money to stand in the first place. It's expensive to get selected and then to get elected. Are we being too nice to MPs, though? Because ultimately it is a privilege to serve in the House of Commons. It is a privilege to... It's almost a service. Perhaps they should take some, sacrifices to do that. Is that an argument? Well, certainly it is. It is a privilege, and most of them are there, feel very lucky to be there. But, I mean, even somebody like Gary Lineker has said recently that he thinks MPs probably should get more money. Now, clearly, they're not going to get a big rise anytime soon, are they, with the cost of living crisis and, everybody's wages being kept down. But I would say one exception. I mean, although Theresa May has made 2.8 million, it looks like she will be eclipsed very shortly by one other former PM, Boris Johnson, because he already made, in the last year, £1 million from 4 speeches. He's just been given £1 million gift by former Brexit Party donor Christopher Harwood. So he's up at 2 million already, and some people estimate he'll probably make 5 million a year. But Boris Johnson is a one-off, isn't he? He does have a way with words that nobody else does. Certainly does, although I suppose, again, with all of this, the context is a lot of this money goes to running their personal offices and all that sort of stuff. I know that he's set up a new office of Boris Johnson for all of these international speeches as well. It'd be fascinating to look in the wider context. We'll come back to you later, Catherine, but for now, we're going to head over to Northern Ireland, where the Labour Party leader, Keir Starmer, is due to deliver a key speech later this morning. Our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, is in Belfast for us. Good morning, Doogie. What's Sir Keir Starmer expected to say?
Well, he was here all day yesterday speaking to the political parties, trying to get the institutions here back up and running. And, of course, they're down because unionists won't take their seats because of the protocol. It separates them from the rest of the UK. So Keir was very much here trying to hear what was going on. But the speech, the precursor to that speech was released to the media at about 2 o'clock yesterday before he actually finished meeting most of the parties. Now, there's no big surprises in it. As the Labour leader, he has said that they are the moral guardians of the Good Friday Agreement, because, of course, it was Tony Blair that was very much involved in that. But Tony Blair has also said that the protocol and the Good Friday Agreement cannot exist in the same space. And, of course, the SDLP, the Social Democratic and Labour Party, the sister party of Keir Starmer's party, want to try and get legislation passed through in order to stop that cross-party cooperation in order to elect a speaker, very much then driving a coach and horses through what is left of the Good Friday Agreement. He also accused the Tories of getting off to a bad footing with the Irish government at the start of this whole situation. But of course, Leo Varadkar was quizzed yesterday, the Irish Taoiseach, of why the first thing that he did when he went to Europe was show pictures of IRA violence and say that the threat of IRA violence coming back was very high. So is it any wonder, because they were 27 states and Britain was trying to negotiate with them. So was the Tories to blame on that fact? We don't really know. It was a very, very mixed up time in politics in Britain, as we well know, that sort of 16-month period after that Brexit referendum. So he's trying to push forward and say that they are going to stay in place, they're going to stay their ground, and they're going to help with the protocol. But he said in that he will give political cover to Rishi Sunak if they want to go in alignment with things like the veterinary agreements that'll ease things with the protocol here. And he will give him political cover if he wants to take on the ERG. 18 months out for an election, that's probably not very likely either. So it really has been an electioneering time for him here, and he's trying to put down his marker of what he would do as a PM, I think, rather than trying to sort out the situation.
Absolutely fascinating to see that Sir Keir Starmer has been in Belfast along with the Foreign Secretary this week and the Northern Ireland Secretary this week. Whispers are afoot that something might well be moving, perhaps fairly quickly when it comes to this protocol, but we'll keep our ears to the ground there. For now, Doogie Beattie, thank you for joining us here on The Briefing. Next today, let's turn to the results of our specially commissioned GB News People's Poll, which has been conducted in recent days. Catherine Forster is still here with the details. And Catherine, just let's start off, where's the state of the parties? Has there been any moving from last week to this week?
A tiny bit, not great news for the Conservatives. 48% for Labour if there was an election tomorrow. That's up to Conservative Party down 1 to 21. Lib Dems, Greens, Reform all around 7 or 8%.
So very much sort of margin of error stuff, pretty flatlining, Tories around 20%.
It does seem to be flatlining. I mean, I think at the worst, in the middle of the Liz Truss mayhem, when that government was imploding, the Conservatives were down to 14%, which was catastrophic. Not that 21% is good in any way, but they seem to have levelled off. A bit disappointing, potentially, for Rishi Sunak, that they haven't risen further. But I think that the hope will be, he's announced his 5 priorities. They are hoping inflation will come down, things will start to improve, and then that the polls will gradually begin to improve.
They'll have to deliver first before that comes about. I wonder, though, there does seem to be within this sort of a lesser sense of enthusiasm amongst Conservatives for Rishi Sunak's administration, for his ministry. I wonder how much of that is potentially because Rishi Sunak is not seen to be sort of taking on the battles. Because there's another question asked in this poll about whether or not Rishi Sunak should have been comfortable having private healthcare or not. And really interesting results.
Yes, so over half, 53% of people polled said that it was acceptable for the Prime Minister to have private healthcare. Only 27% thought it was unacceptable. And of course, Rishi Sunak really didn't want to answer this question, did he? He was asked very specifically at the weekend. He said that's a private matter. He wasn't going to go there. He was keen to stress that he came, though. He was keen to talk about his family background, dad, a GP, mother, a pharmacist, growing up, being the NHS being very important. Finally, during Prime Minister's questions, he did then reveal, he said, yes, I am registered with an NHS doctor. Yes, I have used independent healthcare in the past, but wasn't clear when he'd registered with the NHS, when he'd used private healthcare last, was keen to stress that his family had been supported by their local NHS hospital. So clearly uncomfortable, I suppose, because
And a big contrast to how Margaret Thatcher answered the question in 1987, being proud of having private health insurance.
Yes.
I wonder if this sort of feeds into the Labour attack against the Prime Minister, that he's sort of pushed around by interests.
Well, of course, Labour like to push this line, don't they? It's a potential weakness for Rishi Sunak that his family, or his wife's wealth specifically, is huge, estimated to be more than King Charles. So the charge that he is maybe out of touch, and I think there is a potential vulnerability there. We saw it with the nom-dom tax status of his wife last Easter, which seemed at the time to sort of scupper any leadership hopes about how far things have changed. But certainly, he's playing it safe at the moment, isn't he? He's trying not to upset people. He's being very conciliatory, and he's doing deals with rebels over onshore wind or whatever, rather than forcing a vote and losing a vote. And the online safety bill will be the next battle next week.
And for now, flatlining in those polls, but let's see if there's any movement. Of course, the GB News People's Poll is commissioned every single week, every Friday. But now let's move on, finally, today. The National Union of Students has failed to protect Jewish members from hostile attacks within the organisation. That's according to a new investigation. The shocking inquiry into the matter noted that the employing of ancient anti-Semitic tropes, from blood libels to Rothschild conspiracies, as well as holding Jewish students to the account for the actions of the Israeli state. These are all examples that have been going on in our universities. Well, joining me for more on this is the Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, Gideon Falter. Gideon, thank you for joining us this morning. I suppose there have been stories around the NUS and anti-Semitism for a very long time. Is this the first time that we've got it in a report, written there in black and white? This is pretty unarguable now.
I mean, it is completely unarguable. I mean, it's the 8th report now into anti-Semitism in NUS. And the most astonishing thing about National Union of Students is this is a union which says at the centre of our mission is anti-racism. And you'll remember from your days in the thick of NUS politics that you stood up against anti-Semitism. This is something that generations of people have now been dealing with. Generations of Jewish students, particularly, have been dealing with NUS anti-Semitism. And this is now a really clear report saying it is a huge problem within their student union. Of course, they just removed their president amidst a whole load of allegations around anti-Semitism. I think they've really got to wake up now. And in all the discussions we had with Rebecca Tuck, the King's Counsel who conducted the investigation, it really felt that for the first time there was a sort of someone sane and rational just looking at this and saying, look, forget all of the jargon and all of the promises. You've got a serious problem, and this is how you've got to fix it.
It is remarkable, because I remember back to sort of 2015 when I was involved in the organisation, and back then the president was someone who had described the University of Birmingham as a Zionist outpost, who had been accused of all sorts of very, very malign comments towards the Jewish community. And it seemed like then there was sort of an understanding at that point that the organisation wanted to move on. But it's just slipped right back.
And this is one of the amazing things, and the report actually comments on this. NUS's memory as an organisation is like a goldfish. They have an incident like the one you talked about, then a couple of years go by where they say, we're going to sort this out, we're going to take this seriously, it's going to be the end of it, you won't have this problem again. And not long after that, we have Jewish students, they invited a particularly inflammatory person to their conference. Jewish students complained about it. The Jewish students were told, well, why don't you just go and sit somewhere else whilst this goes on? They then elect a president who in the past had tweeted the words to a chant basically saying, Jews, remember the Battle of Khaybar, the army of Muhammad is returning. And this is a battle in, I think, 628 AD in which Jews were massacred. You've got this kind of thing going on, as you say, not a moment after they had a previous incident with the previous president.
And this matters because the NUS is an important organisation, not in that it's influential now, but in that those involved in it very often go on to senior roles in our politics, whether it's advising politicians or even entering the shadow cabinet. What can be done about all of this?
Well, thankfully, the report actually is quite concrete with a lot of the recommendations. But a lot of it is going to really boil down to what the attitude is within NUS, because some of the recommendations say, you know, you've got to improve disciplinary processes, you've got to provide training for everybody. The thing is that within the world of student politics and on a lot of campuses, you've got people who get away with really quite incredible anti-Semitism, whilst at the same time claiming that they are anti-racists for other causes. And we've got to see a wholesale changing of attitudes within the organisation and taking the recommendations of this report and really making commitment, not just to implement them now and then be in the same situation a few years later, but to actually make this a lasting change which changes the face of student politics.
It is really remarkable how some people, often those who promote themselves as being the most anti-racist, the most progressive people on the face of the earth, have this complete blind spot to a really pernicious form of discrimination. Well, thank you so much for talking through that latest report. Gideon Falter there from the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. That's it for me today. We're back on The Briefing on Monday morning at 9:30. But coming up next here on GB News, enjoy a Friday morning with Esther and Phil. They're coming up just after this.